welcome to Tech Time Today. I'm your host, Jeff. And today we have a good episode, something that I have been, an issue I've run into a number of times, how to generate an SSL cert locally for development purposes. I feel like it's not something that you have to do every day, but when I have to do it once a year, once every other couple of years, it's always the biggest pain in the behind. So we're going to go over quickly one way that I've found to do it that makes things really, really easy. And hopefully you can take what I've done and you won't have to ever experience the pain again of Googling all over the place, of all the silly little issues you run into when developing or generating local certs. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and all of that. But let's get started. All right, so first thing, why do you need to create SSL certs on your local machine for development purposes? So a lot of times when you are creating an app, a web app locally, you don't necessarily have to be using SSL per se. You can test, the functionality of a form, etc. It doesn't have to go through SSL in order for you to test it. But there are a number of cases where it definitely makes sense. When you're actually testing whether something is secure, sure, but actually there's a lot of stuff where it's just requires a certain restriction level. So when you're using things like WebSockets, for example, you need to have SSL enabled, even if it's being developed locally, and that can be a pain. So let's get into how to do this locally. So the first thing that I normally do is I set up a subdomain or some sort of domain that is pointing to my local machine. So you can do this this is for a Mac. I actually have no idea how to do this on a Windows machine. So everything pretty much I'm going to talk about is Mac specific, MacBook specific. But you cannot modify your host file and add a domain that points to your local machine. So that's simple enough. But generating the cert is a little more involved. So I am using OpenSSL, which is a pretty common way of doing it. And there's a number of steps. So I actually have this script here, which after this video, I'll put it on a somewhere where it's publicly accessible and put a link in the description of this video. So you want to create your private key first, which is just a certain OpenSSL command, a different OpenSSL command for creating the root certificate. So that means the certificate and the CA authority are both things that you need for a particular domain and kind of parent domain. So the thing is, when you generate these locally, because you are not an actual CA, so a CA is someone like, Cloudflare or, Google or someone who's actually been authorized to generate SSL certs. You locally have not been authorized, but there's a hack you can do to get around it to have your browser kind of accept it as trusted, even though you aren't actually a trusted source. So you have to generate your CA, which is essentially a fake CA, and then your domain private key, CSR, basically a bunch of different parts of the cert that are needed. And then after you kind of get through all these sections, so these will generate 4 or 5 different files that are used: the public key, the private key, the CA. There's a different version of them, just for the way that I do things. You don't necessarily need this, for every way that you do this local cert generation. But for the way that I'm doing it, I do use a PEM key, so that requires an extra step. But then this is one of the key things. So after you generate all of those files, which you can sort of see here, so cert, the CSR, the private key, my CA files that are for me as a certificate authority. Then this is sort of the trick of it all, is this command here, which it took me a while to like find this, to be honest. But this is essentially a Mac specific command that sort of tells your browser to trust your generated certificates. If you do not do this command and you do all the other stuff, then when you try to go to use it in your browser, it will generate an error. Like it will tell you that this cert's not trusted, et cetera, et cetera. But with this command, you basically are forcing your browser to trust these certificates. And then the last thing is making sure you serve these up. So like that actually can be done in a number of different ways. Like I use Nginx locally, but there's many other ways you could do it. So in Nginx, you can specify the certificates here, the certificate and certificate key, point to where it is, and that's pretty much it. So it really comes down to this script, which does all of the magic. And obviously, when I show this out, you should modify some of the kind of metadata details at the very top of, depending on, even though it is being used locally, you want to specify what the main domain is that you're trying to use, and the organization name, and etc. Thank you for listening, and look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. See ya.